Uhuru na nguvu.
No. You looking at a free black man.
Talk Black 360.
You want to know what a free black man look like? Look at me.
Uhuru na nguvu. Welcome to another dose of Talk Black 360. I am your host, Tino Blaine King, the Kool-Aid and Kush, the pioneer of Black pragmatism. Today, we've got a full and packed dose of Talk Black 360 for you. Unfortunately, we're discussing, amongst others, another Black life lost. We are familiar with the case that's very heavy in the news right now, Tatiana Jefferson, who was murdered at the hands of a Fort Worth police officer. And I don't want to take a whole lot of time to lay out the case because I know that you've heard about it. What I want to do is address the title of today's dose, which is Black People Are Killed with Impunity. And we need to understand why that is. And what this dose is going to attempt to do is bring some rational understanding to what is happening to us at this moment in time inside of this country. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. Take a look at this.
You have your license and insurance?
I have to tell you, I do have a firearm on me.
Don't reach for it then. Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out.
The arrest was captured by a cell phone camera. Within seconds, Officer Daniel Pantaleo had wrapped his arms around Garner's neck. Garner's cries of "I can't breathe" 11 times are among the last words he spoke before his death.
Put your hands up. Show me your hands.
That's when he fires his gun at the woman 5 times.
Okay, look, we already know this type of behavior is unacceptable, but it's happening. It's happening time and time again to our people. We have to begin to understand clearly what we are up against. We can run down a list of names that are as long as the block that you live on. I mean, we had Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Christian Taylor, Alton Sterling, Paul O'Neill, Laquan McDonald, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, Philandro Castile. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And now we're adding a Tatiana Jefferson to that list. And if we continue to try to see this from the perspective of us as a people being Americans and that there being something that we must be doing wrong in order to get this type of outcome, then we're never going to get to the right conclusion. Now, fortunately, while I was doing some of the research for this podcast, I came across a lecture that the brother Cornel West was doing at, I believe it was a university in 2014. I believe the context or the title of the lecture was Race Matters. He's very outspoken, and I love the brother dearly. But at some point, we're going to have to make the decision that this life has to be about self-preservation of Black people. When it comes to our relationship with America, they are good people. But there's not enough good people to protect us from the bad ones. So with that being the case, we have to develop the mindset and the thought process to protect ourselves. Having said that, there's a lot of things in the lecture that Brother Cornell spoke about, and I want to go through some of the excerpts of that lecture so that it helps to define what is happening to our people in this country. So let's just jump right into that. Take a look at this next clip as Brother Cornell starts to set some of the precedent. And I think what we're going to have to do is, before we can move forward, we're going to have to look back. But let's walk through this step at a time, one step at a time. All right, take a look.
We didn't even raise the question of what it means to be a citizen in a democratic republic in any systematic way until we raised the question, what are we going to do about these ex-slaves? What is their status? That's how deep it cut. That's how integral. That's how constitutive race has been and is in the American past and present. But it's so easy to push it to the side and think that somehow the rich promise and possibility of American democracy can be enacted without confronting that legacy head on.
If you are a citizen, why do you have to fight for your civil rights? If you're fighting for your civil rights, that means you're not a citizen. And in fact, the legality of this country, and I won't further investigate the word legality, has never had anything to do with its former slaves. We are still governed by the slave codes. Now, when I say a slave rebellion, I mean that what is called the civil rights movement was really insurrection.
Wow. Wow. So you see, and you got a little extra in that clip, because at the end of that clip, the brother James Baldwin, he did add in some context to the point that I was trying to get across. If you look at the situation that we're in America, how could we possibly say that our relationship to America is the same as any other group's relationship? And if we don't properly dissect the problem, then we're never going to be able to come up with the proper solution. We're continuing to fight for acceptance inside of a system that has never wanted to or was never willing to accept us. Now, let's keep this in proper context. There has always been white people who have not shared the sentiment of America. But as we can see, there has never been a strong enough voice of white people to stop those evildoers of white supremacy from affecting negatively the lives of black people. So as we continue to walk this process down the road, we're definitely going to get mad about the continuous murders of our people. But what is about to get very, very different and become more impactful on our fight is we're about to get conscious of what it is and what needs to be done to change this situation. Our people have been too comfortable for too long, and it's time for us to wake up. Now, in order for us to completely understand why we are being killed in the streets with impunity, we have to look back before we can go forward. And too often, we're looking at this situation in the context that it is in versus a larger context that has led up to this situation. So with that being said, I want you to take a look at this next clip and the clips to come afterwards, because out of this lecture, there was a lot of things that is going to give us the proper understanding of the situation that we are in. Take a look.
Abraham Lincoln says what? He says, Mr. Douglas, I admire your oratoric skill. He said, but I've been living for over 40 years with my white fellow citizens, and I'm thoroughly convinced that the vast majority of them will never, ever treat the masses of black people decently and equally. And therefore, it's best for you to look for a place in Central America. New colony. Frederick Douglass says, I disagree with your conclusion, but I understand your insight. We got a major challenge if we're going to create a multiracial democracy.
You see, as African Americans, we are still trying to force a space for us inside of this country. And I don't negate any of the progress that we have made. But if you study the words of the people who were supposed to even be on our side, you know, how many times in history class have we given Lincoln credit for freeing the slaves? But if you study the mind of the man, he in the very beginning knew that this situation of trying to bring black people to an equal level in society as the white people that this country was founded for was going to be a difficult and almost impossible task. And as of right now, I don't think that there's any evidence that this task is possible. So what are we going to do from this point forward? Are we going to continue to send generation after generation into the fields of slaughter, hoping that in some way we're going to be a saved race of people because of the benevolence of the dominant group in society? White supremacy does not and has not ever wanted that for us as a people. So first and foremost, if you want to understand what these killings are about, you have to look at the history and the full context of what we are going through. And there have been many of us who have argued from the plantation till now about what is the best way for us to move forward. And I think that at some point we're going to have to set aside our differences and find unity amongst each other, regardless of what the differences are, because we share a common enemy, and that enemy is white supremacy. And if there are white folks out there who want to join in the fight, I welcome them. We should welcome them. But there must be a litmus test that you must pass to prove that you care for us. Because it is no longer our responsibility to send our generations out to slaughter in an effort to try and do something that your president did not believe was even possible. But let's look at our leaders who have fought with this idea of becoming one with America versus taking care of our own and moving forward independently. Take a look.
It's in the last chapter of Alexis de Tocqueville's book, Democracy in America, the three races that inhabit this land, that says there'll never be a multiracial democracy here. Never. And of course, it reminds me of that poignant moment 6 weeks before his death when Martin Luther King Jr. went to visit the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Martin turned to Elijah and said, I just think that your attempt to create a black state in Georgia and Mississippi, the panhandle of Florida and Alabama is a pipe dream. I can't conceive of it ever coming about. Elijah turned back to Martin and said, in your attempt to integrate into a burning house is a pipe dream. I can't conceive of how it will ever come about. And tears flowed from both of their faces.
Can't you open your eyes and see the house is burning?
And there we go. There we go. It's time to open our eyes. And yes, you know, I did hear the words of Brother West when he articulated the conversation between Elijah and Malcolm. And I don't think that we could give credit to one and not the other. Because in both cases, they saw the common enemy that we shared. But they had two very different processes in which to undertake the challenge that they had to forego. But it's obvious that the system has revered Martin over Elijah. And it is encouraging us to continue to send our people to slaughter. I think it is in anyone's rational mind that what we must do is look at Elijah and people like Garvey for our way forward. Because continuing to try and force ourselves into a burning house is suicide. The country has made its decision. It will only give us that which does not negatively affect it. There is no sacrifice that this country is going to make for the advancement of Black people. It's been proven time and time again. So what we must do is continue to build independently. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I mean building independently, because there's a lot of ideas out there in the nationalist community that are impractical. But I want to speak to you today pragmatically and about a very practical solution that we need to undergo to stop the killing of our people. And there's another clip that I pulled out of this lecture that is a way, it's a way for us to look pragmatically at what is happening to our people and to really look at where we can measure or how we can measure the role of oppression, the role of white supremacy currently. And what the brother West said was instrumental in this thought process, in the way that we need to look at the situation that we're going through. Look at this clip.
Which is, how do we curtail the use of arbitrary power against fellow citizens? And you always begin with the most immediate form of arbitrary power, which is police power. Police power. That's the litmus test. That's the litmus test.
If the litmus test was to find some redemption in the system, measured by the way that the police power is exercised, then there's no redemption at all. It is clear and obvious that there is no relative commonality between the way that police treat white groups in this society and even all of the other immigrant groups in this society as it is compared to Black people. There's a difference there. It is an unarguable difference. And if we're ever going to have any hope of preserving ourselves, then we're going to have to just look at this test for what it is. It is a failed attempt to bring a people who had no intentions of seeing our people as equal. It is a failed attempt to bring our people into an equal standing or equal footing with those people. And any attempt to rationalize these behaviors is just foolishness. But I'll go on because, as I said, I want to make sure that these steps that we take are well thought out, they are pragmatic and practical steps, and that we're not being overly dramatic or emotional about the decisions and the steps that we take. We have tried for years, but at every turn, we have met adversity. And I think we have to reevaluate our process. So let's move forward. I want you to take a look at this next clip. And when we look at this next clip, we'll begin to build on some solutions. But finally, or at least in this next clip, we're going to finally come to the conclusion that we need to come to in order to make the right decision going forward. Here we go.
A doubling of the prison system in the last 6 years, 2.1 fellow human beings in prison. More black prisoners now than all of American prisoners 5 years ago. Where's the discourse? Their destiny is linked to our destiny. We're all on the same ship, and if that ship has huge leaks in it, we go up together, we go down together. Where is the democratic sensibility there? Which is to say, public interest, common good. How do we relate to each other as fellow citizens, mediating our disagreements with civility and mutual respect?
We are dying every day, and we're in a hell of a condition because we've made a covenant with a government that is death itself, with a people that have lied to us, deceived us, and murdered us, and rubs us good on one side and kicks us in the behind on the other. You are a deceived people.
The answer is simple. We are not met with any civility, and we are not met with any mutual respect. And although the brother Cornel West is an intellectual, I had to end that clip with some fire, because we've got to get the fire in us to change this condition. And if we don't realize that, as the brother Farrakhan said, we are a deceived people, believing in a fairy tale that will never come true. There is no such thing, and never will be a such thing, as a democracy of multi-race in this country. Excuse me. This democracy is for white supremacy. And at every time, at every turn, when we try to make ground or gain our way into the system, working hard, fighting for acceptance and what we think is something that will be equality, we've been met with vitriol. Take a look.
And yet by 1877, you all know the story, the Confederacy lost the war, but white supremacy won the peace. Institutional terrorism sets in. Jim Crow, Jane Crow, American barbarism. 51 years, every 2.5 days, some black child, black woman, black man hanging from some tree. Strange fruit the southern trees bear that Billie Holiday sang.
Strange fruit. When you ask yourself, how could a police officer go on a welfare check. And the result being the police officer killing an unarmed black female in her own home. How could you come to any conclusion that there is any civility or respect for black life? There's a number of different scenarios in our past that tells us we are only allowed to rise so high. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, they stopped us. Rosewood, they stopped us. You know, a lot of you don't even know the story of Wilmington, North Carolina. When you get a minute, take a look. Wilmington, North Carolina, 1898 was a time in American history where the radical white supremacist, with no regard for black life, not only did they overthrow appointed black government officials, they killed them. They killed them and buried their bodies in the swamps. And we don't know about these stories, but look it up. Look it up. We don't know about these stories when they're happening. We find out about these stories 40, 50, 60 years later. And you think when we're dealing with white supremacy, we're dealing with rational minds. Someone that's playing by a particular set of rules that are fair. That's not what's happening. We're being slaughtered as we were slaughtered 100 years ago. Strange fruit. In case you haven't figured out what that song is about, it's black people hanging from trees. They've just found a more effective and efficient way to get rid of us. And look, a lot of people are going to say, Tino, your commentary, conjecture is not fair and balanced. Nope, it's not. It's never going to be fair and balanced, because fair and balanced is not going to give a minority an equal opportunity. So instead of being fair and balanced, I think I'd rather be truthful and unapologetically black. But as I said, every time, at every turn, when we try to step up and speak out and move forward, we're shut down. Now, I want to lighten this up a little bit, because we're going to get into the context of talking about where we go from here. So take a look at this next clip.
We as black people, it's time. It's time for us to come together. It's time for us to rebuild a New Orleans, the one that should be a chocolate New Orleans. And I don't care what people are saying uptown or wherever they are. This city will be chocolate at the end of the day.
Former New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin will serve his 10-year prison sentence. The WDHUI team broke the story that Nagin will be sent to a federal facility in Texas.
I don't care what anybody says. This is not fair and balanced. This is real. I don't believe if Ray Nagin would not have made those statements, I don't believe he'd be in jail today. And there's a lot of opposition, but I'm just being honest. So the reality of these police shootings is that it's just another form of holding our people back. It's another form of fighting the reality of producing a multiracial democracy. We have to adopt our own culture, a culture that is beneficial for Black people, a culture that allows us to educate ourselves the way that we need to be educated, and a culture that allows us to prosper and grow on the global stage. The culture of America does nothing for us. And there are those who are going to want to be African Americans, regardless to what I say, and that's fine. So be it. But for those of us whose eyes are open, we've got to pay attention. This country just wants to move forward without facing the reality of the devaluation of Black life. This country is all about the money, getting more, and moving forward. And we can dangle behind the train as it roars down the track to our own demise. Take a look at what George Bush had to say when the country's met with adversity, how they move forward.
As we work with Congress in the coming year to chart a new course in Iraq and strengthen our military to meet the challenges of the 21st century, we must also work together to achieve important goals for the American people here at home. This work begins with keeping our economy growing. And I encourage you all to go shopping more.
Can a democracy survive with such a market-driven culture in which non-market activities are pushed to the margin? And of course, the ultimate non-market activity in American culture is parenting, caring, loving, supporting, nurturing, push to the margin. And we see the results. Will the younger generation have what it takes to revitalize, regenerate, and reinvigorate the best of American democracy? That's an open question.
It is about culture. It is definitely about culture. And this culture is not conducive of Black success. We have to seek out a culture that is. And the reason why I continue to talk about Pan-Africanism is because, not because Africa is solely the answer for Black people in America or even other people of the diaspora, but it is because we have to focus on something that is going to be different yet productive for our people. In looking at Pan-Africanism, we can go back and see that the spiritual systems of Africa held at its core the Black family, the Black man, woman, and child. This culture does not do that. It does not speak to the soul of our people. It does not speak to the core of our existence. Pan-Africanism will give us an outlet to begin to reestablish ourselves as a people. And yes, Africa is in all types of turmoil itself. But what I'm saying is, with a new intellectual Pan-Africanism, we'll begin to develop everything that we need as a people to move forward and to release us from the bondage and the oppression and the slaughter that we're dealing with in America. Take a look as Brother Cornell speaks about Pan-Africanism and black nationalism.
And that's one of the reasons why there has been and will always be a black nationalist tradition in the black community and in America. When Marcus Garvey, who led the largest mass movement among black folk to do what? To leave the country. Most of the world wants to come. Get in on the goodies, the rights, the liberties. Marcus Garvey had 3 million black people that said what? That said, I agree with Alexis de Tocqueville. I agree with Abe Lincoln before he changed his mind. I can't conceive of a multiracial democracy. I just don't think that the vast majority of white brothers and sisters will ever treat the masses of black people decently and equally.
I can't do anything but agree. If you look at the evidence, how they slaughter our people in the streets, in their own homes, I can't see any other rational outcome than accepting the reality that the masses of white people will never treat the masses of black people decent and with respect. So Pan-Africanism is the answer. That's not excluding any of the other movements that we have. But Pan-Africanism opens the doors for us to look at them all. And I want you to know something. Even though Africa is in trouble, the youth in Africa are waking up as well to the power of Pan-Africanism. So the last clip that I want to play for you just observes some of the thought process of the youth. Take a look.
What is Pan-Africanism, you may ask? I would like to define it for what I think it really is. That being an ideology that asserts and supports the solidarity of Africans worldwide. It stresses on the fact that our unity as Africans, not just within the continent, but as well as the diaspora, is a vital part of our economic, social, and political progress.
And we need to reinvent this idea, this notion that we have of Africa, and realize that the attributes that we often associate with Africa are in fact historically constructed by hegemonic powers and are in fact arbitrary. After all, change only becomes possible once we are aware, once we question the way we think, and once we challenge the institutions that are put in place. Thank you.
Fundamental, basic. We need to start changing the situation. And we have to become aware. We have to challenge the way that we think. And we need to really look at the structures that are put in place to govern us. It's time for us to start governing ourselves. Black liberation is the only answer to white supremacy. Thank you. And until next time, stay strong, stay black. Ashe.
This has been another dose of Talk Black 360.
No. You will never be enslaved again by no man.